We are beginning a study in the book of Joshua. If we were to take this book verse by verse, it would take us over a year. So we're not going to do that. We are going to take half a year. What we're going to do is we are going to take it one chapter every week. So that'll let you know, so you can look at whatever chapter we're at and then just the following week, what I want to encourage you to do is to read the chapter beforehand. Because I won't be able to cover everything in a chapter, but I'm going to hit some highlight. So that's kind of where we're going. We'll take a break from time to time with Father's Day or maybe with some stuff like that from the holidays. But that will take us through a good part of this year. The book of Joshua is an interesting book. Joshua is probably the writer, where it actually doesn't say specifically, so we're not exactly sure. The book is really about conquering Canaan. It's about the children of Israel. As they took their journey from Egypt, they go into the wilderness for 40 years. They then end up getting ready to enter into the promised land. And so the journey looks something like this. And if you look at that top, as you're looking at it, your top left-hand corner, you see that area called Canaan. That's the book of Joshua. It talks about the children of Israel. They cross the Jordan River, and they go in and they overtake into the land of Canaan. Now, if you listen to a lot of the old, particularly those of you who like Southern Gospel, I was raised on Southern Gospel, so for those of you who listen to Southern Gospel, a lot of times they'll talk about the Canaan as heaven. You know, we died and we crossed the Jordan River and went into the promised land. That ain't so, okay? And here's why. Because in Canaan there's battles. And in Canaan there's an enemy. And that ain't heaven, all right? So you still listen to your gospel music, you enjoy it all you want. Just theologically, keep that in the back of your head. Because really, what happens is the book of Joshua is really about the Christian life. Some people say that the New Testament parallels the book of Ephesians because it's really about the Christian journey. And so really the idea of crossing Jordan is kind of the salvation experience. And it's the idea of now as you go into this Christian life, what kind of stuff do you encounter? So it has a lot of practical applications for us as we head into it. The book's a historical narrative. What I mean is there's a lot of history involved and there's a lot of storytelling involved. There is a huge theological problem that people have with the book of Joshua, and here it is. Why does a loving God tell his people, when you go into this land, you wipe them all out? Men, women, children, destroy them all. So that becomes a big theological issue for a lot of people. So let me help sidestep it for you just a little bit. There's all kinds of solutions and there's all kinds of answers to that question. Some people believe that the reason God has them do that is because if they don't, they will the Israelites will tend to follow their gods. So this is a way of purging the land. Some people believe because the Canaanite people, their worship was so ungodly that it's a punishment for their sin. There's actually some commentators that actually have this idea that it was an offering to God of all of this stuff, and it forced the children of Israel to kind of start over and not be dependent upon some of the stuff. One idea is that it is a conquest idea. It's the idea of this is our land and you need to go away. There's all kinds of ideas behind it. But here's the thing. God's God, he can do what he wants. And he doesn't owe us an explanation. Okay? This is what he does. When we do that. Probably the easiest outline of the book that I like is the first 9 chapters dealing with God speaking to Joshua. The next 5 chapters or so, Joshua speaks to the people, and then at the end of the book, the people speak back to Joshua. Joshua is an interesting character. Actually, if you want a fascinating study in leadership, Joshua is a kind of a good guy to follow some leadership principles from, because it's kind of amazing. We first see him in the story of the children of Israel and going into sending the spies into the land. You guys remember this story? 10 were bad, 2 were good? Remember that? 10 were bad, 2 were good. It's a little harder to do. But anyway, the 2 that were good, Joshua and Caleb. They come back and say, yep, everything they said was true. There's giants in the land, but that's okay. Our God's got it. Don't worry about it. And basically, you know the story. The children of Israel continue to rebel against God, and finally God says, okay, you're all going to die. Everybody under the age of 20 is gone, with 2 exceptions, Joshua and Caleb. So that's where we see him. We see him then when they're fighting the Amalekites. That's the story of they're fighting the Amalekites, and Moses is sitting up on the hill, and Aaron and Hur lift up his hands and they have the battle. Well, it's Joshua who's down there doing the fighting. Okay, and actually his name was originally Hoshea, which meant salvation. In Numbers chapter 13, at the end of that, in that story, his name is changed to Joshua. God is salvation. And so at that point, his name becomes changed. When that battle happened, when the children of Israel go and they're at the promised land and they send the spies in, we know that Caleb is about 43 years old. We don't know how old Joshua is. So a lot of people, I personally like the age 40. I like the 40 thing because that's when Moses had 40, 80, 120. You see Joshua, some people say Joshua at that point, when Joshua and Caleb go in to spy out the land for the first time, that Joshua is 29. That's really about the youngest date that we have for him. We know that then they're going to be 40 years in the wilderness. So the oldest date that we kind of have for him is about 45, depending on who you read. So by the time we get to Joshua chapter 1, he is somewhere in the age of 70 to 85. Moses has just died at 120. And Joshua's going to live to be 110. So basically, but here's what you need to think of. Here's what you need to, again, I'm trying to wrap your head around it mentally. Here's what you need to realize. Joshua was born in Egypt. So all he knew was the Egyptian lifestyle. But somewhere along the way, he had embraced the ways of Jehovah, of God. When we get to Joshua chapter 1, so let's just assume, I'm going to go with the 40-40 thing. Let's just assume he's 80 years old. Okay? You have to remember, the oldest person that he now has in charge of him is going to be, let's say he was 19 at the original deal, plus 40 years, is 59 years old. In other words, he's leading into the promised land a whole bunch of youngsters. No wisdom. Because he and Caleb are the oldest. What a task. What a mindset. And if that's not enough, who's he following? 120-year-old Moses, who was Moses. When we talk about this guy Joshua, I kind of give you a little bit of a visual. I did run across a religious art picture that I really love. And it's this one. And this is a picture of Moses at Mount Nebo. Now, it's not a real picture. It's a painted picture. We didn't have cameras back then, kiddos. This is a picture of Moses. Well, is that an AI-generated thing? No, it's an actual picture, all right? No, this is Moses, in essence, kind of giving his blessing to Joshua, who's now going to follow him. And then, of course, Moses is going to die. So I thought this was a cool idea. So that's kind of wrap your head around this thing a little bit, okay? Because this book is packed full of principles for us. So this morning we're going to jump in. I'm going to read a couple of verses. We're going to kind of talk about it, read a couple more, talk about it, read a couple more, and then we're going to grab 3 principles before we leave here. So here's the first verse, first passage. After the death of Moses, that's a huge statement right there. Now Joshua and Caleb end up being the oldest people out of the children of Israel. The servant of the Lord, and it's interesting because it talks about Joshua being the servant of Moses. Joshua isn't referred to, and then at the end of the book of Joshua, it talks about Joshua as a servant of the Lord. But anyway, the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River in the land I'm about to give them to the Israelites. I will give you every place where your foot set, as I promised Moses. Now, verse 3 is a key verse for the whole book. He basically says, look, Joshua, everything I promised to Moses, you now get to enjoy. Wherever you step, that's yours. Now, if you're Joshua, and God comes to you and says, hey, you're up. What are you thinking? Because I guarantee you that's what Joshua was thinking. And if you're God, how do you encourage this guy who's now got big shoes to fill? Notice what the next passage talks about in verse 7. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Don't turn from the right or the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything that's written in there. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have not I commanded you? Be strong and courageous. This next phrase boggles my mind. Don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged. For the Lord will be with you wherever you go. God basically comes to him and says, Joshua, I understand this is a big deal. But don't worry. I've got you. Now, what bothers me about this passage is a lot of people pull this thing out of context and they look at this idea and they say, see, you're guaranteed to be prosperous and successful. And they apply it to financial prosperity. I don't have time to dive into it all, but in the Old Testament, you should know, it's a stretch to even apply one of them specifically to financial prosperity. This is not dealing with your pocketbook. What this is dealing with is the idea that God will take care of you. God will provide. God will work this thing out. And he comes to Joshua and he goes, Joshua, I need you to lead these people, but I'm going to give you a warning here. You stick to my book. Then what happens is he comes to it, and verse 10, so Joshua ordered the officers of the people. Joshua kind of organizes this thing, and he starts divvying stuff up, and he says, okay, you go throughout the camp, and you tell the people, get your positions ready. 3 days from now, you'll cross the Jordan here and go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. Here's what I think is amazing. He basically looks at these people and goes, hey, 3 days, I'm turning your world upside down. Everything you knew, it's all going to be different. It's all going to be different. You know how you get up every day and there was manna? That ain't going to happen anymore. You know how those shoes that you put on the same shoes every day because they haven't worn out for 40 years? Guess what? They're going to start wearing out now. Your world is going to turn upside down. So get ready. Now, again, I mean, you think about what you're telling these people. Well, yeah, we know that. Oh, really? Because you're about ready to find out just how hard it's going to get. Because now all of a sudden you're going to have to think about, what are we having for supper tonight? For 40 years, that's been an easy decision. Manna. Now, again, you're desert people. All you known is the desert. For 40 years, all you've known is the desert. And now all of a sudden you're going to see walled cities. And you're going to see wells. You're going to see all this stuff now that you're going to have to deal with that you've never had to deal with. Your world's turning upside down. And how long do you have prepared? Joshua starts walking in and goes, hey guys, we got 3 days. Start packing. And by the way, if there's complaints, who do you think they're coming to? Well, I'm not ready to move. Too bad. Back it up. We're going. Honestly, we forget it. When we read those stories, we forget these kinds of things. And then, here's what's interesting. 2.5 of the tribes, okay, Gad, Reuben, and half of Manasseh, the land that they're going to possess is on the east side of the Jordan. They're already living there. So you know what? Joshua comes to them. Notice what he says. Your wives and your livestock and your children can stay in the land that Moses gave you east of the Jordan. But all your fighting men ready for battle must cross over ahead of your fellow Israelites. You are to help them until the Lord gives them rest, as he has done for you, and until they too have taken possession of the land the Lord your God is giving them. After that, you can go back and occupy your own land, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you east of the Jordan towards the sunrise. Now, we read this story and we don't pay attention to this, but do you understand what he does here? You got 2.5 of the tribes who are on the east side of the Jordan. They don't have to fight. Their land is theirs. They're already living there. And Joshua comes to them and says, hey guys, come here, let's gather up. I need all of your men, all of your young fighting men. You're going to go battle with us on the other side of the Jordan. And by the way, notice what he says. Don't miss this. They're going to cross over ahead of the fellow Israelite. We're going to put you at the front of the line. When we go into battle, you guys are going to be the first ones in the most danger. You're going to go fight for all of these other people. Then when we're all done, you get to come back. How do you think that message went over? But that's what Joshua does. He says, that's exactly, you're going to go in and you're going to fight for the other people. Listen to the response. They answered Joshua, whatever you've commanded us, we will do. And wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we fully obeyed Moses, we'll obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Now, listen to what they say. Whoever rebels against your word and does not obey it, whatever you may command them, we'll put them to death. And then they say what God said to Moses, or to Joshua, only be strong and courageous. These people look at him and say, look, I know you're worried. Will they follow you? We're going to follow you just like we followed Moses. Now, I'm not saying they did it, but this is what they said. Because, we're going to get a couple chapters into this, and you're going to find out they're all wanting to kill Joshua. But here, they look at him and basically say, you know what? We've got your back. And we'll follow you. And it'll be okay. Let's go do this thing that God's given us to do. So let's pull out a couple principles for us that I think will help us in 2025 from this passage. Here's the first thing I think. You have to realize that God is going, if you're a Christian, God is going to grow you. And you know how God grows you? He pushes you out of your comfort zone. Joshua had spent roughly 70, 80 years of his life following Moses, doing the right thing, letting somebody else lead it, and then God says, now it's your turn. And if you don't think this guy was scared of the responsibility that had just been dumped on his shoulders, you got another thing coming. There's a lot of people to take care of here, and now you got to figure out a whole lot of stuff. And they had been loyal to follow Moses, and they had started to learn, and they didn't want to follow what their mom and dads had done and not paying attention to God. So now all of a sudden they're starting to follow God, and Joshua now, it's thrown onto him for him to go lead this thing. This is a big task. I mean, just feeding these people alone, because there's not going to be manna anymore. The manna's going to stop. So now you got to figure out how to feed them and clothe them. Now all of a sudden, they got to get shoes. I mean, my wife could not have lived during this time. I'm just telling you. To have to wear the same pair of shoes for 40 years, that was not happen. But yet now all of a sudden they got to figure out the shoe thing. And Joshua's looking at this going, this is huge. What an Herculean task in front of him. Here's what I'm going to say to you. Because some of you are in similar situations right now this morning. You have something in front of you that's gotten dumped in front of you, and it is huge, and it is overwhelming, and you're not sure what to do, and it is scary, and here's the thing you need to remember. God is in the middle of that. And God is pushing you out of your comfort zone. One of the guys who I look at as a mentor because he's had such a big influence in my life, one of the game changers for me was about 15 years, 20 years ago. I don't know how long it's been now. But he purposely would set up trips to push us out of our comfort zone. And I'm telling you, I'm talking about like major stuff. Walked in one day, I'll never forget, like 4 or 5 of us, 6 of us, whatever else, walked into a nail salon. Thought he was going to buy gift certificates for our wives. And he goes, grab a seat, boys. I said, say what? We're all getting pedicures, manicures. You don't understand. Nobody touches my feet. And there is no person on this planet you can give enough money to touch my feet. And we did the whole kit and caboodle. I'm talking about I don't know what it was, like a seaweed wrap thing all the way up to your ankles. We're in massage chairs. We're kicking back. We're playing with the controls on the massage chairs. Some little poor foreign girl who drew a short straw is messing around with my feet. And we did the bath thing where all the bubbles and all of that. And I'm sitting there going, you know what? I think I get used to this. And that's like, well, you need to choose a color for your nails. You know what? Was I uncomfortable? Yes. Was it a new experience? Yes. Was it outside of my comfort zone? You bet. Was it a life lesson? In more ways than you will ever imagine. God is going to push you out of your comfort zone, just like he did with Joshua. I go back to something that Rick Warren said. God is always more interested in your character than your comfort. God's not sitting in heaven going, you know what, I want to see, how can I make them comfortable today? No, God's going, how can I get them to grow? How can I get them to take that next step? How can I get them to do that next thing? How can I get them to trust me more? You think for a moment that Joshua wasn't on his knees before God saying, God, help me through this? It's one of the reasons we do lay leaders. I have people go, that lay leader thing, that's like the most miserable week of my life. It's like everything. And I'm like, welcome to my world. Yeah. But you know what? You talk to anybody who's done it, they've grown more in that week than they have the other 51 weeks out of the year? Why? It pushes them out of their comfort zone. Well, I'm not a public speaker. No. You're somebody, here's the key. You're somebody who's going to stand up here dependent upon God. And God's going to do something with it. That's why I say, do a children's sermon. Go help in the, listen, it is amazing to me who we have helping over there in the children's deal right there. People who 10 years ago you went and said, hey, you want to go work with the children? Are you kidding me? They scare me. And now, this morning, Jimmy last week talked to me. He said, hey, Sarah and I might have a chance to get away. I said, go. Go spend the weekend with your wife. Go spend some time with your family. So he went to the group that he's got working with him, and they ran the whole thing this morning. Why? Because we got people who stepped out of their comfort zone, and God used them. And you would be amazed. Don't keep pursuing being comfortable. Because God's going to use you when you get uncomfortable. Second principle is this. How do you handle it? Over and over again, God says, be strong and courageous. In other words, go ahead and depend on me. And he says, here, I'm going to give you the key. You just simply follow and do everything that I've said to do. It's that simple. You take this book of the law, and you learn it, and you apply it, and you do what it says, regardless of how you feel. At the end of the book of Joshua, you know what Joshua's going to do? He's going to give a challenge to people. And you know what he's going to say to them? Do whatever you want. Make a choice on whoever you want to live for. But as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. We're going to follow this book. I've been doing this for over 40 years. In 40 years, I've watched a lot of people make good decisions, and I've watched a lot of people make bad decisions. You want to know the difference between the people who do well and the people who don't? The people who've decided to follow this book. This book was written by God who created and designed us. He knows what's best. Well, you don't understand. My situation is different. No, your decision is simply a decision to say, I know what the Bible says, but this is what I want to do. And you'll live with the consequences of that. That's simple. Well, it can't be that black and white. It is. God says, Joshua, you want to be able to handle what's in front of you? Follow this book. Don't go from the right. Don't go from the left. You do exactly what it says. You want to know how to have a better marriage? Follow it. You want to know how to raise your kids? Follow it. Turn off some of the silly, goofy podcasts that you're listening to go, well, I don't want to harm them, so I'm going to try to be their friend, and I'm going to rationalize and help them to understand everything that they did and why they shouldn't do it and the consequences. They're 2 years old. No. That's how it works. Choices have consequences. That's how it works. Go, baby, go. You learn, you just simply do it. You just simply do it. And like I say, you want to learn how to run your business in a way that honors God? Follow the book. You want to know how to conduct yourself in the community? Follow the book. You want to know how you lead a whole bunch of people who have to follow some great leader? Follow the book. That's what Joshua says. That's what God says to him. He says, look, Joshua, you want to do well in this thing? I understand it's overwhelming. I understand I'm asking a big thing for you. You want to do well? Follow the book. And we make things so complicated. Husbands, you want to know how to, again, I go to the husbands all the time, but you want to know how you be a good husband? Outlove your wife. It's that simple. outserve her, outlove her. That's what you do. That's what you do. And, you know, we make this thing so complicated. Kids, listen to me. Honor your parents. Yeah, honor your parents. By the way, that's one of the Big Ten. You know, and we forget this kind of stuff. We try to make it so, well, you don't understand, they didn't do this, and, you know, and I didn't. You honor them. Honor them. Again, as we go through this whole thing, you know, Joshua, how's he going to handle this thing? Be strong and courageous. Follow the book. And you're going to watch him. That's what he does. That's what he does. The other thing in this story that I find is amazing to me, and I think probably one of the big lessons for us is this. It takes a community to accomplish what God wants to accomplish. In this story, he looks at 2.5 of the tribes who've got it already made, who really don't have to have any battles. He looks at it and he says, since you don't need the land, because you've already got your land, you go help these people. I can't stress this enough. As Christians, you need other people in your life. You have to be very careful here of, and again, I'm preaching to the choir here. We get so independent-minded that we don't want help, and we're not going to ask help, and we're you know, by God, we're going to do it on our own, and we're going to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and I'm going to be able to look at this and say, I did this. And we miss out because we need each other. In my life, anything that I have seen God do in my life, any time that I've watched God use me in my life, you need to know it's because there is a long list of people who have mentored me and helped me and guided me and been a part of this thing for me. And in this story, Joshua looks at these 2.5 tribes and he says, you guys don't get to sit back and do nothing. You go help them. And what I would say to you is if you're in that spot right now in your Christian life where things seem to be going okay, then you go help somebody. You go be a part of somebody's life. You go, you know, all the parenting stuff that I've learned over the years, I've learned it from other people. And I have a whole list of people in my life who they have special ear. If I have financial issues, I have a great Christian financial guy that I go and talk to. If I have parenting issues, now it's like grandparenting stuff. I have grandparents that are on my top 5 list. And I go to them and say, hey, what do you think I should do here? I have them be mentors. I have businessmen who have made a huge impact in my life because we've been at a crossroads as a church trying to decide something or trying to, and I get embodied or embroiled or wrapped up in this Christian world. And they're all saying, well, you know, you need to cast a vision statement for the people. No, go put tape on the floor and tell people, hey, here's what a door is. Now figure it out. You know, well, you need to understand. You need to set you need to have a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan and a 20-year plan. You got to understand, we're working on a 2-week plan. You know, well, that's not great leaders. You know, I understand there's some things you got to, you know, Jimmy always gets on me about this because Jimmy's not the long-term planner. And, you know, that's not his strong suit. And that's my strong suit. So we sat down last week and I go, okay, I'm going to show you the preaching schedule from now until December 1. He looks at me and goes, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, no, this is it. This is when we're going to be preaching on this and this and this, and mapped it all out for him. You know, I'm not saying you don't do that, but what I'm saying is we've got to get to a point where we have people who can help us and guide us and direct us and mentor us. And I'll never forget, I was really struggling with this whole ministry, retirement concept thing. And my heart's here. I'm not going to bail and retire and go live in a mountain with a bear or something like that. I mean, I'm not going to do that. That's not my thing. I will always be a part of As long as God can use me, I'll always be a part. But there comes a point at which you got to pass the baton. And there comes a point at which you then have to become a helper to somebody else. And so I was struggling with that, and I went to somebody who has made that transition in business. And I sat down with him and I said, give me some principles, give me some guidelines. And I'll never forget, because what he said, I didn't like. And I disagreed with. And I walked out of there going, I think he's got this one wrong. But I've learned enough over the years from him to pray about it, think about it, talk to other people about it. You know what happened? The more I prayed about it, the more I thought about it, the more I realized he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. So I sat down with my wife and I said, look, here's where I am. Here's what I'm thinking. You know? And we've watched God do some amazing things and pull some amazing things. And I think, I'm just going to tell you, I could not be happier handing the baton to somebody. It's going to be a little bit before that happens, because A, he's scared to death. And B, I still have a few more messages in me. So, we're just going to keep letting God use us to do what God wants to do here. But I got to tell you, you got to have those people in your life. And if you're in a position to be one of those people, be one of those people. These 2.5 tribes, they didn't have any fight. They had their land. They had their stuff. Joshua looks at him and says, okay, not only are you going to go fight, this is what I think is amazing. Not only are you going to go fight, we're going to put you in the front. And you know what they said? Okay. We'll follow you. And I just want to challenge you with this. You need people. And if you don't have people, go get them. And if you can be one of those people, go be one of those people. It's community. So I wrap it up with this. Joshua faces a daunting and overwhelming future after the death of Moses. He sets his focus on obeying, honoring, and trusting God. And he approaches the future with courage, and God prospers his efforts. God will do the same thing for you. But it's going to require that we follow God no matter what the cost. So seek God's plan this week and follow him. Let's pray. Lord, help us. Thanks for your word. Thanks for Joshua. Help us to not just hear it, but to do it. For those that are facing some really tough things this week, that, Lord, you give them grace and strength, wisdom, understanding. That, Lord, you would help them to be able to very clearly see ways to depend on you through it. For those of us, Lord, who are in situations where we can help others, help us to do that this week. And Lord, for all of us, may we decide that we're going to follow you and your word explicitly without reservation. These things we ask in your name. Amen. Let's stand together and we're going to sing.